Why do some people earn more than others? Why do professional football players get paid millions while teachers and librarians get paid pennies on the dollar, maybe 40, 50, $60,000 a year? This is the podcast where economics meets simplicity, and I explain concepts in everyday language and life. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Econ 101.13. Today, I'm excited to dive into one of the most important forces facing your everyday life: wages. Supply and demand can really explain it all. And in this video, we're going to look at clear examples, real world situations, and simple concepts that anyone can grasp. Whether you're a student, worker, or a curious individual about what determines your paycheck, you're in the right place. So let's start with the basics. At the heart of wages is this concept of supply and demand. Think about supply and demand like a marketplace. A business provides a product or service, and consumers buy it, but they have to meet at a point where they feel that the price is agreeable. If a pizza shop was selling a pizza for $20 a slice, not too many people would buy it. But if they sold it at 50 cents a slice, that's a great price. Everybody would buy it. People would be rushing. The demand would exceed the supply. So they kind of agree at a middle point. And that's really the heart of supply and demand. In the labor market, however, things are a little bit flipped around. The demand for the labor is how many workers employers want to hire, and the supply of labor is how many people are willing and able to work at a given wage. So think about a job market. For a specific position, there are people who are able to do the job, and there's also the demand. How many of that job the companies want to be able to hire? When demand is high and the supply is low, say for skilled engineers or experienced nurses or tech in a hospital, employers compete by offering higher wages, which makes sense. If there's a limited labor pool, obviously the wage is going to be higher. But not only that, it's going to be stock options, compensation, and they'll even throw in perks and benefits like paid time off and even paid for meals. On the flip side, when the supply is high and demand is low, think about like entry level, like retail workers or roles with fewer required skills. The competition shifts, wages stay low. Think about a grocery store clerk. The requirements are not necessarily onerous. You can work there in high school. You're basically stocking the shelves, doing some basic cashier work. The supply remains high because many people can do the job, but the demand may be inconsistent or even low at times. So there's only a few big grocers in town. The demand's probably not going to be there, and with a high supply, wages are going to be pretty low or close to minimum wage. So we can even break this down a little bit further and talk about how supply meets demand and talk about how wages are affected in each scenario. Ideally, you want to be in an area where there's high demand. Supply can vary, but let's talk about a high supply, high demand area. Think about software engineers. If lots of people are learning coding, that increases the supply. But if companies are also hiring aggressively, demand rises too. And this keeps wages high as long as the demand grows faster than the supply. In the case that AI becomes so strong that they don't need software engineers, then the demand for software engineers will go down and the supply will remain high, which is why you see a lot of layoffs in certain tech industries from year to year. You could also have a low supply and low demand area. Think about blacksmiths or people repairing VCRs. Not many people offer those skills anymore. It's a low supply, but also nobody really needs to hire them. It's not really a necessary, not an industry in demand. Wages stay low, or these jobs can disappear entirely. You could also have a high supply and low demand area. This is definitely where you don't want to be. You have a bachelor's degree in a saturated field like general studies or psychology or kind of those journalism, liberal arts. They often lead to underemployment. You have too many graduates and just simply not enough jobs. It's why you end up with baristas holding bachelor's degrees. But it's not just tied to liberal arts, it can be any field that has a lot of people in that field, but just simply not enough demand. It's why when you study arts, it's often necessary that you do like a master's or increase your qualifications or credentials because it's just simply a competitive field. The best is a low supply, high demand area. People need your skills and qualifications, and this is where you're going to have a really high salary. Skilled trades like electricians and welders in certain regions can command high wages because fewer people actually train for them, yet the demand keeps rising. Maybe you look at an urban area and there's a demand for elevator mechanics, but only a few people actually know how to repair elevators. That's why you see their salaries being somewhere in like 150 to $200,000 a year. This leads to a key point. Wages are not just about how hard the work is. They're about what people can do and how many employers want to fill in. This is why plumbers and skilled trades, they're often a career that's often dunked on, but in actuality, they can earn more than someone with a master's degree in philosophy or other general studies. It's all about supply, demand, and market value. In Vancouver, there's a big demand for head chefs and chefs working in restaurants, like a Chinese restaurant. And supply, because of the lack of supply and people that are able and willing to work those jobs, they're often paid a very good salary. So, at its heart, the wages and what you're paid for is largely determined by supply and demand. But there's also other significant factors as well. There's also geographic factors that can influence why a nurse might get paid like 90,000 in one state or province, while a nurse in another earns 70,000. A teacher in California might make 85,000, but one in Mississippi makes only 45,000. Here are some other reasons why wages may vary by location. First is the cost of living. Look at a place like Silicon Valley. If the wage wasn't competitive and if the wage wasn't high, not too many people would work there. In expensive cities like Toronto, Vancouver, or New York, the wages are higher to help workers compensate for basics like housing, food, and transportation. These are some very expensive housing markets. That's why a $100,000 salary in New York might feel the same as 60,000 in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It's because the cost of living balances out the wages. So $100,000 might seem like a lot in New York, but then again, an apartment's like what, $2,000, $3,000 a month, and a lot of that paycheck is going to go to covering for those costs. Another is just basically industry clusters. Different regions specialize in different industries. So Alberta is big on oil and gas. Silicon Valley and the Bay Area is very tech heavy, and Ontario is manufacturing and finance. If your job is in demand where you live, the wages go up. If you're in the wrong region, you may face underemployment or lower pay. And there's also the implications of things like unions. Places with strong unions or favorable labor laws tend to have higher wages, especially in areas like public sector jobs and union friendly provinces. They sometimes come with higher benefits and pay. And if a region doesn't have enough skilled workers, wages go up to attract talent. Let's talk about teachers in British Columbia. So, in British Columbia, in Vancouver, a lot of the population is condensed in areas like Vancouver, Surrey, Burnaby, Richmond, the greater Vancouver. Outside of Vancouver and the greater Vancouver, the population is very sparse. So, let's say, for example, in rural areas, wages will often go up to attract talent. It might be more enticing to live in Burnaby than, say, for example, Fort St. John. That's why in these cities, wages have to go up in order to entice people to come and work. In areas and crowded markets like the big cities, competition can also drive wages down for many entry level roles. So always think, what's the demand for my skills where I live? Would I work more if I moved? And realize that economics doesn't just apply to countries, it applies to neighborhoods and on a micro level as well. So you might be thinking about what to study when you go to university or college. But let's start with this. Not all degrees pay off equally. I think that's one of the downsides of colleges and universities is that they're often focused on, making sure the graduation rates are the acceptance rates are good, that doesn't matter what they study, that you just I think you have to understand that when you're choosing your study, not all degrees pay off equally. In fact, a degree's value can shrink if too many people pursue it, or even if the job market doesn't keep up. And this is called credential inflation. Maybe a generation ago, a high school diploma could land you a solid office job. But now, even a bachelor's degree might not be enough because it's not that you're not smart, it's just that the supply of graduates is too high. This is why you often see people that when they graduate university or college, they often work in unrelated jobs. You might see somebody working in an office job with a sociology degree. That's not because sociology isn't valuable, it's an incredibly important field. It's just because the market just simply doesn't have enough room for all of the graduates each year. So, what should you do when you're thinking about wages and making sure you pick a career that has a good wage? There are a few things that you should consider, and these are the things that impact wages the most. One, you should continue to follow demand and look at where jobs are growing. Think about jobs like in the healthcare, trades, tech, even green energy and business. They're continually expanding and jobs are continuing to go up. Second, you want to be able to stack your skills. This is a very competitive job market. I think the summer in years and probably in a generation is probably one of the most competitive. You have the growing influence of AI. You have you have companies that recently had major layoffs, and you have a lot of people graduating from university. A degree plus a skill, language, or certification can make you all that more competitive. If you have a second or third language, that might increase your pay as well. And think geographically, you might be underpaid in one region, high demand might be somewhere else. Be willing to move if needed. And also be watching trends. Use labor market data like job postings and wage reports to kind of see where your field is heading. And specialize, specialize, specialize. General degrees are fine, but niche skills are hard to replace. The soft skills like communication, teamwork, problem solving. Think cybersecurity versus a general IT. If you graduated with a general IT engineering degree versus somebody who specializes in cybersecurity, the cybersecurity is much harder to obtain if you're looking in terms of who's hiring. This is how you outsmart a crowded job market. Don't just follow your passion, you have to follow the market and your passion, and that's where opportunity lives. I know this sounds cruel, but in many ways, following your passion might lead to an area where it's simply too saturated and there's not enough demand and not enough companies that want to hire you. Because largely wages are shaped by supply and demand in the labor market. Your location matters. The cost of living, the industry, and local policies also affect wages. If there's too many people graduating in your area, your degree can lose value because the supply is way too saturated and there's simply not enough demand. In order to succeed, make sure you specialize, stack your skills, learn about trends, and be ready to adapt when necessary. And that's my podcast episode on how supply and demand and markets affect wages. I hope you pick a good career and one that's in demand and you get paid a high salary for your job. If you found this video helpful, thank you for watching. Give it a like and share it with somebody who might find this podcast interesting. And of course, subscribe to Econ 101.13. We make economics practical, personal, and relevant. Until next time, keep learning and keep leveling up. See you later.